Okay? So we had an argument between Rav and Shmuel in the Mishnah when it says, so let's get the cases. We're Nun Gimel Lamed Aleph, 53a. We had three cases. Hamatame. Now there's a question in the Gemara, what is matame? Did a person take truma and he took a source of contamination like a sheretz, a dead rodent, and put it to the truma? What happens when you touch the truma with a rodent? Until now it was edible, halakhically edible. It's not edible anymore. You've devalued it to a nil value, because its value now can only be used as fuel by the Kohen. Truma tamei, the Kohen is supposed to burn. You're supposed to burn it, and the Kohen could benefit from it as fuel. A non-Kohen is not permitted to benefit. But for all intents and purposes, you've taken something which had eating value and you've diminished it. It can no longer be used as a food item. So you've reduced it to nothing. That's one understanding of matame. Or it could be speaking that it's chulin, and in Eretz Yisrael, the produce of Eretz Yisrael, there were a certain sect of Jews who were called chaverim, which means they observed the Torah on halakhic, meticulous level. They would eat chulin al taris hakodesh. Even something which was non-consecrated, they would eat it meeting the standard of something that was consecrated. Something like truma, they would treat it like truma. So matame means he contaminated chulin, which it's still edible, but it's no longer edible to that kind of person. That person won't eat it because he has another standard. It's like, I'll give you an example. You have parshas or pasako, right? Or paspalta. The person has a choice to eat bread that was baked by a Jew, and that a Jew participated to any degree in the baking process. Even take a splinter, throwing it into the fire while it was baking, before it crusted, that's called parshas Yisrael. Or commercial bread that's baked by a non-Jew, but all the ingredients are kosher. You should eat parshas Yisrael. Not paspalta, not commercially bread baked. It's kosher. And if you don't have parshas Yisrael, even if you have paspalta, some people would not eat the bread unless it's parshas Yisrael. But that's not a din. That's a chumrah. That's a stringency. Right? So the same thing. Chulin al taris hakodesh was a standard which people took for themselves. And they took it for themselves. It was really a fence. What was the fence? Because you never know what happens if it's something which is consecrated. Let's say you have kochim. And the kochim become contaminated. It's a problem. There, you're not permitted to eat. Consecrated meat, like a korban, or ma'aser sheni. Ma'aser sheni, which ordinary Jews permitted to eat, becomes contaminated, not permitted to eat it. So they accepted a fence on themselves that the produce of Eretz Yisrael, if it should get contaminated, even ordinary produce, they would not eat it for that reason. Okay? So there's a question in the Mishnah when it says matame, was it truma, or was it some chulin, which is al taris hakodesh, which they set that special standard for themselves. Okay, we'll see.
That correct as well?
No, nothing. It's rabbinic, purely, that's a rabbinic stringency they took on themselves.
No, but if Israel eats truma, that's correct.
Because it's not permitted to eat truma, even if it's not contaminated. Chulin, you're permitted to eat. You're permitted to eat. The Kohen's permitted to eat chulin that's contaminated.
So Rabbi, this Jew who touched the truma to the sheretz.
The sheretz to the truma.
Yeah. Is he a damager?
He's a damager. He is, but there's no liability if you're of the opinion hezek shein niklosh mehezek.
So there's no penalty to him.
No, the Mishnah says if he did it, no, it's not. That would be. There's no restitution.
There's no restitution.
But penalty, if he did it deliberately, there is a penalty. Rabbinically, we penalize them.
But not midoraisa.
Midoraisa, there's no penalty. There's no restitution. Because there's no physical damage. A damage only if physically he diminishes. It's restoring it physically.
There is a physical aspect to this.
No, it has.
Kohen cannot eat.
Good, so that's a restriction. But in terms of the actual item, it's the same item. The item hasn't been physically diminished.
Because you cannot visibly see it.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
damaged.
See, what about if the person takes poison and mixes into food? One visually you can't see the poison.
So
That's physical.
Because you can. You have to use an instrument.
Right. Correct. Exactly. Okay? So, Matami, the Gemara is going to discuss in a moment what Matami is. Is it Truma or is it Chulin? But then the next case is Medama. Everybody agrees Medama means you intermingled. You had wine that was Chulin, and you added Truma to that wine. So what is it now? Now the wine is only available to the Kohen. So you diminished it, but it's a partial diminishment. It still has value in terms of an item that can be drunk. When you take Truma and you put the sheretz, you've taken something which is edible, and you turn it to something which is no longer edible. You reduce it to non-edible. When you take Chulin and you add Truma wine to it, now, not you elevate it. No, you limited the market. Only Kohanim now. So it's still potable. It's still you could still drink it, but you've limited the clientele who could drink that. Okay, so it's a lesser degree. Okay, so we have a question. Then it says menasech. So when I'm on the Rabbi, what does menasech mean? Nesech normally means menasech means the person who did the act of libation. Or menasech could mean he took yain nesech, wine that's not permitted to be drunk, which is Yisur Hanoah, and he added it to kosher wine, intermingled it. So the question is, what's the difference between medama and menasech? It means the same thing. So the Mishnah gives us two cases. For medama, if you take kosher truma added to chulin, deliberate you pay. You're a damager rabbinically. If you take yayin nesach, you add it to kosher wine, you're a damager. Seems to be redundant, right? So you see over here, reducing the value of something, we penalize you. So what does the Mishnah have to mention? The nasech? Nasech means intermingling Isser Hanoah with chulin. Yain nesach with chulin. So therefore Rav says that's not the meaning of menasech. Menasech does not mean taking yain nesach, adding it to chulin, but rather it means doing the act of libation. Taking wine and pouring it and having in mind, but declaring this is for the sake of idolatry. So the wine, that act, causes the wine to become Isur Hanoah. Okay? That's the way Rav learns the Mishnah. Now, are you with me? Mm-hmm. Okay. Shmuel takes issue with that. Shmuel says you cannot learn it that way. Because if that's the case, if that's the act of doing an idolatrous act, you say, Kim, let me drop your name. Right? Which we discussed yesterday. The same action brings about a double liability, the death penalty, and a lesser liability. Even if you do it deliberately, on a Torah level, there's no restitution, there's no penalty. So on a rabbinical level, definitely, we're not going to say, right? You're not going to pay. But the Mishnah says if you do it deliberately, there is liability, financial liability. So evidently, menasech cannot mean doing the act of libation, but rather it means taking wine that's Isur Hanoah because it's nesech, because it was used for libation, and intermingling it into kosher wine. So we have to respond to Rav's point. But the Mishnah is redundant, because the Mishnah already says medama. When you intermingle something, you reduce its value, you're a damager, rabbinically. So if you reduce it to nothing, you're definitely a damager. So why does the Mishnah repeat it? It seems to be redundant, the Mishnah. Right? That's Rav's question to Shmuel. So Shmuel has to respond. Okay, so we discussed yesterday how Rav deals with it. Because Rav says, because the act of lifting is the act of stealing, and the libation is only when you actually do the pouring. So they were not simultaneous. Shmuel holds no, that since to be in violation of libations, you must first lift before you pour, therefore it's no different shooting the arrow where to be violation of transporting a Shabbos, if it lands and it was never removed on Shabbos, you haven't done the Melacha on Shabbos. See, the beginning brings to the end. Retroactively, the first act, when it concludes as libations, it already began with the lifting.
There's a difference in the arrow. Once you shot the arrow, you cannot retrieve it. But once you lift it,
So that's the argument. That's what they're arguing. That's what they're arguing.
It's not a choice.
That's what they're arguing. That you could retract it and stop it at that point, is that the equivalent of the act itself at that moment, or it has to be the moment that the liability happens. And we don't say in retrospect. That's the argument of Rabbi Shmuel, the two approaches in Tosfos. Because one opinion, one lashon, one version of the Gemara is, there's no difference when you walk with the knife or you shoot the arrow. The other version is, no, you can differentiate. Because the arrow you can't retrieve. So the beginning already is the end. And there's a question, there's a little bit of aggression. There's a question, we have Arba Ovis and Zikin, the four categories of a damager. Of course, if the person himself damages, he's liable. What about your animal or your money, your asset causes damage? The Torah says, Yechayev, you have liability. Right? You let your animal go astray in somebody else's field and it causes damage, whether it eats or it tramples. Whatever the damage is, you're the owner of that ox. The Torah obligates and sees it as the damager. And he has to compensate the damagee for whatever damage the animal caused. Okay? Now, one of the categories of damager is Eish. Torah says in Mishpat, a person lights a fire, and it goes out of the confines where he lit it, and it goes and burns down someone else's field. So it says, Eish, you're a mazik. You consider a damager. So whatever damage it causes, okay, you're liable. So Gemara Gitin, Eishu mishum chitzov, Eishu mishum amono. When you light the fire, it's like shooting an arrow, or it's like your animal. It's like your money. You created the fire, and the fire caused damage like the animal caused the damage. What's the halachic difference? So Gemara says, the difference is, let's say a person takes a slave, binds him in a field, and then he torches the field, and the slave is burnt to death. Is he a murderer? If you say, Eishus Mishum Mamono, when you create the fire, it's like your animal, you release your animal, the animal gores the slave and kills the slave. You're not a murderer. I mean, you have to pay 30, this penalty, this knas, but a person's not a murderer. It's right, it's type of grumma. But if it's Eishum Mishum Chitza, but if lighting the fire is like shooting the arrow, you actually, and somebody, before you torch the field, you were forewarned. The person is liable for the death penalty. It's like you shot the arrow into the slave. You killed the slave directly. That's Eishum Mishum Chitza. The Eish, the fire, is like shooting the arrow. Okay? So now, there's a question which is asked. So, once the fire is lit, although you can put the fire out, it doesn't make a difference. Even if the fire could be put out, we still say Eishum Mishum Chitza. Right? The reason why the Gemara asks the question like this: when your animal damages, why is it damaging? No, it's your asset is damaging. If you don't have fueling the fire would go out. So if I light the fire in my field, and it goes out of my field. That the fire continues to burn, that's not the original fire I lit. Really, it's causality. I caused the fire to continue because there's fuel there further, which fuels that fire. So really, it's not my asset. My asset is not damaging. When your ox goes and damages, it's your ox that's causing the damage. That's called Mammon Amazik. It says you're liable for your asset because you did not control your asset. The fire is not my asset. Even though the original fire I created, but the subsequent fire that burns, that's not mine. So why does it wait? So what does Torah hold you liable? The answer is because Torah says it's like shooting the arrow. It's like shooting the arrow. You shoot an arrow regardless whether it's your arrow or somebody else's arrow. If the arrow pierces whoever pierces or damages, you're liable for that damage. That's not causality. That is you're direct damager. Okay.
So, Rabbi, just if a person doesn't put up a parapet on their roof and someone falls and dies, what is the liability to the one who owns the house?
Only between him and God. No financial liability. Definitely.
So what kind of an act is that?
No act. No act. It's not even right. It's not even bidei shemaim. There's no financial liability.
It's not a drum.
I was passive. No, there I was passive. Grum always I do an overt act, but the result is indirect, which causes it.
But my asset.
Did it damage? No.
Was responsible for the death of
No, he got too close to the edge of the roof. First thing should have been on the roof. Shouldn't have been on the roof.
So, in the eyes of heaven, what is this man? Is this man a murderer?
Firstly, it's not, because the Gemara says he only fell off the roof because he deserved to fall from the roof. But it's not a good reflection on the owner of the house Because whenever God does something negative, right? This is Begal B'Chol Chayav. God brings detriment to a person who's unworthy, who's not meritorious.
So you see, there's different kinds of, you see different levels of culpability here, because shooting an arrow in actual fact is no different than pulling the trigger on a gun.
Correct?
Once the bullet leaves the chamber,
100%.
it's gone. Okay.
If it hits its mark.
If it hits its mark. So a
Exactly.
gun and an arrow is the same.
Same thing. Same thing.
Al pi halom.
Yeah. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
But it's hard to see how lighting a fire.
No, that's the Chiddush HaTorah. That's a Chiddush. That's the Chiddush.
That's a Chiddush?
That's a Chiddush HaTorah. So now the Torah says the Chiddush. How do we understand that Chiddush? Is it the arrow or is it the animal? And that's an argument. It's an argument in the Gemara. So Gemara says it can't be your asset because factually the fire I lit is not the fire that's burning. Because it's not my fuel for fueling that fire. And the other one says, but factually, but it's not your power. When you shoot an arrow, it's your power behind the arrow. Right? The Gemara in Mattos discusses a case if you throw something, it ricochets off something and hits something else and then kills a person. Does the person have liability? Does he go to Ori Miklot? Is he considered an inadvertent killer? Because when you throw the rock, it's your power behind the rock. You shoot the arrow, it's your power behind the arrow. But here, when it ricochets off, it's not direct. It indirectly killed the person. It wasn't his power directly to hit the person. So maybe there's no liability. That's not called you killed him. You indirectly killed him. For indirect cause, that the Torah doesn't obligate the person to flee to a city of refuge.
Did you say that the bullet is the power of the person to pull the trigger?
Sure. You launch that bullet.
Well, it's different than an arrow.
But same idea. Same idea. Same idea. Same idea.
There I ignited.
Same idea. Same idea.
Fuel.
Because that's immediate. You put the power behind that.
There's no difference between these
Right.
two.
Correct. Correct. 1 second. So there's a famous question which is asked by the Nimukei Yosef. If you hold Eishim Shemchitzov, so how do you light Shabbos candles? Well, if you say so the Gemara says if you Eishim Shemchitzov, the slave is burnt, the person is liable for the death penalty because it's like he shot the arrow into the slave. Okay. So the Nimukei Yosef, who's the commentator back of the Gemara Bava Kama, understands Eishim Shemchitzov means that every time the fire burns, it's at that moment I'm shooting the arrow. Because the original fire I ignited is not the fire that burns. So we see, even though it's causality, that fire is as if I lit that fire. That as if I torched the slave himself. As if I put the fire to the slave. Right? So yes. So how do you have a light Ner Shabbos? You light the nearest before Shabbos. But it continues to burn. So if you hold Eishim Shemchitzov, it's like you're lighting the fire every moment. So you're in violation of Shabbos. That's his question. What? Therefore what?
So once he lit it, he fulfills the mitzvah.
No, but if you go follow the principle of Eishim Shemchitzov, that you understand, it's as if every moment I'm igniting it. So if that's halachically, I violated Shabbos. So you take, well, if you have financial liability, so you should have also liability. You violated Shabbos. So he answers, Eishim Mechitzah means as if I'm lighting the fire every moment. If you shoot the arrow before Shabbos and it lands on Shabbos, you're not in violation of transporting. It's the fire I lit before Shabbos, it continues to burn. So it is, the end result, you put a pot on the stove, fire before Shabbos. Now it's cooking on Shabbos. Why is it cooking on Shabbos? Because you put the fire on the fire before Shabbos, but when is it actually cooking? It's cooking on Shabbos. It's not a problem. Because the act of cooking is putting it in position to cook. The same thing. I lit the fire. So it's implied it's burning because I ignited it before Shabbos. So it's not every moment. That's one answer. That's the Nimukei Yosef's own answer. So, but if you torch a field and you have a slave bound there where he can't escape, so it's like you shot the arrow directly into the slave. When you torch the fire initially, that fire is if you put the fire directly onto the slave, and you burnt him to death. There's a famous answer from the Beis Meir that the mitzvah of of Shabbos, there are two things. There's a lo saseh and there's naseh of tishbos. You must refrain from malacha. Now, when the candle was burning, even if you say halachically as if I ignited the fire, but what was I at that moment? I was in a state of refrain. I wasn't being proactive, doing a creative activity. You say halachically it's the equivalent of that, but I wasn't. So therefore, we're saying we're differentiating. As a liability, as a damager, you're a damager. But to meet the criteria of Shabbos to be in violation, you have to be actively involved in the creative activity. He's not actively involved. Well, halachically, halachically, doesn't bring a liability for Shabbos.
Does anybody say that lighting a fire that kills a person's chayah?
Yeah, that's what it was. If you say lighting fire, like
is that the halacha?
that is the halacha. The halacha is you torch a field where there's somebody in the field bound that he can't escape. You actually, that's arson.
But it's only that
That's-
narrow case. The guys in the field, you could have escaped. But you didn't.
Yeah. But what about if you have people sleeping in a building, and they're not going to be aware by the time it's time to escape, they've succumbed to smoke inhalation. The person's a murderer.
It's no different than shooting an arrow?
No different from shooting an arrow.
You have to say this.
I mean, that's the law. I mean, arson, the person's a murderer.
Or sin.
You have to say this, otherwise one's never be able to say Lakas Neros for Hanukkah, Shabbos. They're never going to be over official. You have to say it. That's
No,
right.
of course. Because no, it's different. What's the malacha? This is specifically by H. There's a chiddush by H. It's not by bishul. Bishul says you're not permitted to do the act of cooking. So when did you do the act? The act is putting it on the fire. I put it on the fire before
Because
Shabbos.
there's always going to be a delay, but I shouldn't say always. In most cases, there's going to be a delay between the time one puts a pot full of food on a fire and when it actually cooks. So we
Yeah,
have
but
to say it
then
like
what's
that.
the malach of
You
cooking?
have to say it like
What
that.
is the malach of cooking? No, it's different.
What if you put a pot up 5 minutes before Shabbos, 3 days before after Shabbos? So you planted a seed.
You're not in violation of cooking.
Well, in that case, either.
No, you're not. You're not.
You should need both then.
You need them both.
You need the act of lighting the fire.
Let's say you put a pot on the fire half an hour before Shabbos is over. It's not going to cook till the next morning to be edible at a minimal level. When did it violate cooking? Because there was no effect. That act brought back no effect.
But I thought when you plant a seed,
It's a question they asked. Good question. Gemara says it takes 3 days for a seed to germinate to be considered that's Zoreya. Zoreya is only 3 days later. So there's a question, Mattos speaks, you put a seed in the ground, and then after you put it in the ground, you remove it from the ground. Are you in violation of Zoreya? Planting. Right? The halacha is definitely you are in violation of Zoreya. He says, why? He says, if you put a pot on, so he asks, if you put a pot on the fire, and before it starts cooking, you remove it from the fire. You're not in violation of Bishul. So why over here, when you put the seed in the ground and you remove it, why in violation of planting?
Who asked that question?
What?
Who asked that question?
The Mattos Chinuch. Because
What's the answer?
no, the answer is a very simple answer. Planting, it takes 3 days for it to germinate. It doesn't start for 3 days. So planting has to be the act. It can't be the result, because the result is always after Shabbos. But cooking is, you're not permitted to cook on Shabbos. So you give me a scenario where it doesn't cook, right? So you should be liable from the moment you put it on, because normally, right, it should be like the seed. No, the seed has to be that way, because otherwise you'll never be in violation of planting.
but nothing cooks instantaneously.
No, it doesn't, but it cooks within Shabbos. It cooks within 24 hours. Here, planting would not be possible. If it's the end result, it's always after Shabbos. It's 3 days. It's a 3-day process.
So, Rabbi,
You can never be chayav.
You'll never be chayav for Zoreya.
No such thing as a real.
But there is, evidently, it must be putting the seed in a position where it will.
Rabbi, didn't we discuss a case where the man opens the dam,
I
and
was
the
waiting
people
for
at
that.
the bottom there, they get damaged or killed.
Killed,
Or something.
yeah.
So that's grama.
No, it depends. Wait, it depends.
Because that would sound
No,
to me like
wait.
fire.
Let's talk. We learned this in Sanhedrin.
Yes.
It's more in Sanhedrin. If you open a floodgate, and somebody's right before the floodgate, and as you open the gate, you cause the rush of water to kill the person. The person's a murderer. and it has to cascade down a mountain, that's called groma. Of course, there's it's delay. No. It's specifically fire.
That sounds. I mean, it sounds similar to fire.
No.
Because there's a delayed reaction.
No. It's not the fire. It's not the fire. The fire, you created the fire. Here, you're using the power of nature. You didn't. The water's killing him. The water's killing him. The force of the water's killing him. The fire which you created is killing him or damaging. That's the difference. We only attribute it to you because you use the force of nature to bring about. So we only say it's your force because of its immediacy. But if there's a delay, that's called indirect.
I initiated this process.
Doesn't make a difference.
The same with the fire.
No, but
It
I'm
happened a
explaining to you.
mile away.
No. But the fire that's burning is the fire you created. You didn't create the water. So why are you liable initially when you opened the floodgate? Because there you're using the power of nature. So there the power identifies with your power. But you didn't create the water. Here the fire that's burning, you created that fire. That's your creation.